Hello, everybody. Dosan. It is me, Pacific. Dosan in Cantonese means good morning. I wanted to do a video on Hong Kong. I did a lot of videos on Hong Kong when I was there, me riding the ferry, me riding the tram, and me talking about the Chinese in Hong Kong. But I want to talk about Hong Kong as a place. Many viewers have asked me over and over, what did I like about Hong Kong? Why did I like it? People have asked me, if you got $1 million in big money, would you move and live in Hong Kong? Move to and live. I will tell you what I believe is an accurate understanding of Hong Kong. This is not an exhaustive video. I don't know everything about Hong Kong. I lived there 13 months. But I want to say something. Hong Kong is a fascinating city, rich with culture. It is a world-class city. It is very international, with people calling from all over the globe that work there, that live there, that thrive there. Hong Kong is an electric, energetic city. The pulse there is unbelievable. When you see the traffic light change, you suddenly can't see the crosswalk anymore because there's so many people with black hair going by. Hong Kong has 7 million people. It's composed of 3 parts: Hong Kong Island, New Territories, and Kowloon. Hong Kong Island is that island in the South Pacific, short ferry ride over to the mainland that's actually connected to part of China. That's Kowloon, and then New Territories, which is further north. You can take the MTR, which is their version of a subway, that goes pretty fast, and it's a pretty efficient system. You can take a tram on Hong Kong that goes from basically Sai Pum or Sheung all the way out to Sai Wan Ho and a little bit beyond. There's a number of good bus service and taxis all over there. 18,000 taxi cabs in Hong Kong. To give you a comparison, that's the whole population of Hibbing, Minnesota. 18,000 taxi cabs. When I was in Hong Kong, one of the reasons it had such a powerful effect on me is because it was the first time that Pacific, on his own, left America unattended, except by the hand of God, and went to another country. Of course, anybody that goes to a country for the first time by themselves, they're going to have an experience. Some people have an experience and they don't ever want to go back. The first time I saw Hong Kong, I was wowed by the material aspect of the city. The skyscrapers, as the Filipina girl that I met over there said, the skyscrapers, they stick together. Unlike New York, where there's light in between buildings and stuff, some of the skyscrapers are jammed right up against each other, and Hong Kong has had a boom since the 80s, with more high-rises going up, more demand for office space, more demand for flats. Hong Kong is very crowded. I love Hong Kong. I like the hustle and bustle of it all. I like the fact that, and I don't know what the percentages are, but probably 70% of the populace doesn't drive. I love that. Nobody's going to look down on you for Hong Kong for not having a car, unlike American females tend to do. The food is great, authentic Chinese. But there's a few things about Hong Kong that I did not discuss in my videos that the average tourist and expat in Hong Kong is either unaware of or doesn't care. One of the things that struck me about Hong Kong was the large expat culture, people from Australia, Britain, America, and other Western countries. They live a very affluent lifestyle. The women, most of the women that live in Hong Kong are the wives of expat husbands who got cushy jobs, and they have nothing to do except spend money, hang out with other women, and they've got the easy, comfortable life, and they walk around like they own the place and they're the cat's meow. Sadly, what is not talked about a lot about Hong Kong in any of the media is the huge amount of poor people working just to live. When I think of people in Hong Kong, I'm amazed that it took me a while to find out that a huge, vast population of Hong Kong is working 6 days a week, 12-hour days, just to pay their rent and buy their food. No car payments, no insurance payments. They're not getting in debt. They're just trying to survive. Hong Kong real estate is some of the highest priced in the world over London, Paris, Tokyo, and New York. I read that myself out of the Hong Kong Standard, their Monday through Friday newspaper, which was free, handed out on the streets for free. I loved it. I took the paper. I even wrote an letter to the editor that got published when I was there. Great little newspaper. But most expats don't realize that the cushy life they live and the huge dichotomy and disconnect between the expat society that cruises in and out of mid-levels and eats at expensive restaurants and goes to the nightclubs and lives the good life, they're almost completely ignorant or unawares of the cage dwellers in Hong Kong. The cage dwellers are those people that they buy or rent a flat or own a flat and they stuff 30 people in there. And it's big enough to crawl into. It's a bed and a shelf, and that's your room. You get to use the toilet. These people are paying money just to live like this. In America, that would be considered squalor. It would be considered substandard, and city code of any city or town in America would shut it down. Not so in Hong Kong. $6,500 is the average price, not the average, it's the going rate for a 3-bedroom flat in Hong Kong. $6,500 US dollars. The disparity between the expats and a lot of the Chinese that work there is scary. The side that we don't see in the media and the glitzy, glossy glamour shows is the Chinese working class, which is the huge underbelly of Hong Kong that doesn't get to enjoy the Hong Kong high life. When I was in Hong Kong, I watched in my flat the lady that I rented from. She was a Filipina who lived in Hong Kong and worked as a domestic helper for years. There was a TV show on her TV about these Australians with their dogs going to some doggy training school and some doggy, basically spa retreat type thing, and the money they were paying. And the Filipina looks at me and she goes, "You know, Pacific, this is disgusting. Look how much I have to work to make this much a month, and these people pay this for their dog." I laughed and I looked at her. I said, one of the things I hate about our culture is people value pets more than people. The woman that I pursued over there, the relationship that failed, the woman that I chased after to get familiar with Hong Kong, was a Filipina. She worked for an Australian husband and wife, both of them younger than me. She was a royal snob, overweight, had the good life, and was one rude son of a gun. I never got to meet her when I was over there. She never made the effort to meet me. And even on the day off when this woman and I were supposed to be together, she had a legitimate day off and she was commanded to come in the middle of the day or come in for a breakfast, of which I was not invited to. And it was Christmas Day over there. Now, as you know, I'm not into Christmas, but to the Filipinas it was a big deal, and to the expats. She went over there. Most employers, most expats give the Filipinas a bonus on Christmas Day. The woman that I pursued didn't get any. They gave her a potted plant, gave her a breakfast, made her part away from the company of me. She gets 1 day off a week, and she didn't always. Sometimes they took that away from her. She had to work 7 days a week. What really bothered me is I really started going, wow, these expats aren't really nice. In fact, I started to see them more as the people who live in Laguna and Malibu and Beverly Hills. Royal, stuck-up, narcissistic snobs. When they went on vacation for 2 weeks to go to Thailand and Bali and all globe-trotting Asia, they left a note. I had never gone into their building. You can't. In all the skyscrapers and all the high-rises, there's a security desk, security cameras. You walk in and they're going to ask you, who are you? And you have to tell them where you're going. You don't just walk in. Never went into the building. I wasn't allowed to go in there. I was not a resident. I didn't have business there. But I would walk her to her employer's place, the front door of the high-rise. She was left the following note. Do not bring Pacific into our place while we are gone. This is our place, and we do not want people in here other than you. She was offended. She told me that. I was appalled. I wanted to write them and say, how dare you think that I would sneak into your place? Do you think I'm that low on the totem pole that I'd want to sneak into your flat? She couldn't see me for 2 weeks. She was ordered to stay home and watch their, guess this, 2 dogs. The woman told me she saw the bills for the dogs, the vet bills, the dog food, everything. The total per month, because she handled some of the bills, she had to open them, sort them, and she saw the prices. She said, you know, my employer pay more for their 2 dogs than they do my salary for 1 month. American viewers, you listen to me. I talked a lot about the Chinese. In Hong Kong, there's a minimum monthly allowance. I think it's 3,580 Hong Kong dollar a month. That comes out to about 400 US dollars a month. And a domestic helper gets paid to do the laundry, clean the house, run the errands, run the kids to school, take care of the dogs, wash the employer's car, a host of duties that I can't even begin to cover. Some white people had a history of treating their domestic helpers like gold because they were just so shocked at how low they got paid. I know one domestic helper who liked me. Her name was Jane. She was sweet. She was cute. She'd always say, oh, my gal. She had picked up the British accent from her British employer. Her British employer paid her fairly. Says he doesn't even have me clean the house. He has me as secretary of his resort in Indonesia, in Bali. She said, I'm going to Bali. And the guy treated her like gold. I was like, wow. There were stories of some expats, but this Australian couple paid her the minimum, never gave her a bonus, and then take her away on Christmas Day when traditionally that's the day that people would be with their own family. They didn't care that I was sitting outside the building up the hill on what I called the tram steps. There was a tram railway that was pulled up by a big steel cable up the hill to go up to Victoria Peak. Pretty cool thing. And I was disgusted. My eyes became more and more open to the Australian culture there. That's why I spoke on the Australian culture. There were a couple of Aussies that were nice to me. There was one lady that hired me to walk her dog. There was another lady that hired me to walk her dog. They were both very good. One was very accurate on Aussie culture and said they're very insular. A lot of Aussies do not, the Aussie expats who were there were not into fraternizing with the Chinese. In fact, I often notice that the Australian parked their Australian culture in the middle of an Asian freeway and basically stuck their middle finger up at the Chinese. They bought all the cool Chinese embroidery stuff to hang on their walls, but they didn't really mingle and mix with the Chinese much. They got their own level, living in mid-levels. And I talked about in another video, she made $400 a month. They paid more for the 2 dogs' accoutrements than they did her working her butt off 6 days a week, 15-hour days, and often 7 days a week. They're supposed to give her a day off to make up for that, and often they did not. What bothered me in Hong Kong is the amount of money that flowed through there, that people can hire these domestic helpers, and even the expats get over there and get accustomed to, well, this is normal. They're getting more pay here than they would in the Philippines, so they feel no guilt. Her employers constantly went on vacations, did stuff, never gave her a bonus, and she even complained to me, my work is so hard. I'm so tired of doing all this. The dog tore up the couch one day, ripped the stuffing out, peed and pooped all over, and the dog was out of control. And I couldn't help but think, these stupid Aussie people bringing big, outback running dogs and stuffing them in a flat with no yard, and she's got to walk them 3 times a day. Total craziness. All that for 2 dogs. But let's focus on Hong Kong. I dated a Chinese woman that worked at a seafood restaurant down in Shangwan. Name withheld because I'm going to protect the people I know. She worked 7 days a week. I don't know what her pay was, but she took she took the bus from a place called Tai O down to Moi Wah, where I was then living on Lantau Island. 45-minute ferry ride, not sure how long her bus ride was. Get to Hong Kong, then walk 20 minutes from the ferry dock to the restaurant in Shangwan. 7 days a week. We talk about how the Asians are hard workers and all that, and we admire that, but the fact is they have no choice. There are 2 types of people in Hong Kong. Those are driven to success and earn money to send your kids to college, to get your retirement, to do this, to do that. And then there's the other group of people that work 7 days a week or 6 days a week, long hours, just to survive. They're the hamster in the wheel. And it's sad. We tend to look at Asians and say, wow, they're so disciplined. In Hong Kong, people jump out of skyscrapers when they don't do well. They jump out of skyscrapers when they get demotion or a less than perfect grade. As I walked through the streets of Hong Kong, and I spend a lot of time in karaoke bars, I don't drink. I liked the girls. And as much as I thought it was fun to sing and dance, after a while, I noticed something emerge. As a Christian, I would go into these karaoke bars, and I thought, I really don't belong in here. It's kind of a drinking culture, and these people on their 1 day off a week are going in here to lose themselves. I talk a lot about Asian women and how much better they are, but I'm going to tell you something that saddened me. Lots of Filipina and Indonesian women in Hong Kong, desperate for love, desperate to get off the treadmill of being condemned to be a domestic helper for the rest of their days. Most of the Filipino were happy women, and I will admit that, but they were tired too. And as I sat in karaoke listening to music and all that, and then I'd leave late at night, middle of the night, walk through the shadows of the skyscrapers being cast on the street lights, and the city winding down after 10 p.m. And I loved Hong Kong. Hong Kong had its own soul and feel to it. And I'd walk through the alleys, and I was so safe. 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm walking through alleys between high-rises with no street lights, pitch black, and not feeling any fear. And yet, I watched the Chinese day in and day out with their stone-faced expressions and thought, is this really a happy city? It is if you're sitting on the wealth like the expats and your employer pays for everything and the wives can walk around and drink the alcohol and hang out with other 6-foot-tall women with their cleavage exposed. And I say that because it was disgusting to see the way Hong Kong accommodated the expats with the upper-end malls, the expensive places. And I watched these expats, and again, back to my original premise, the more comfortable somebody is, the worse they become with their manners, rude. The runners would run up and down on the Bowen Road and plow into the domestic helpers and order them out of the way. Men, 6-foot-tall Aussie men, proving their prowess by picking on people that were less fortunate than them. And then when I was there, I read in the Asia Expat that the bike Nazis from Australia were complaining that there were no bike paths in Hong Kong. And I'm laughing as I'm reading this, yelled out, and my flat made so much noise, everybody heard me. They said, "What is so funny?" I said, "The Aussies are complaining that they don't have a bicycle path in Hong Kong." As if that would work. Traffic is bumper to bumper. The roads are just narrow enough in some places to permit a car, and if you're walking and a taxi comes down at 80 miles an hour, that mirror is that far from your body. No joke. A bicycle path. When I lived in Hong Kong, I found myself polarized on several different fronts. I thought, well, the Aussies are white. They would be my friends, right? No, they hated us Americans with a passion. And the funny thing is I wasn't the obnoxious one. They were. They were the rude ones. I wasn't the rude American. They were the rude Australians. And then the pushing and the shoving and the coldness and rudeness of the Chinese. They weren't walking with smiles on their faces. They're walking like zombies, fast and on a mission. And the more time I spent in Hong Kong, I thought, is this really a happy, loving, peaceful city? We're safe, but is it happy? And I thought, no. There was an air of depression there the more time I spent. The expats aren't doing so well either. Friday and Saturday night, they're getting schnockered down in Lodo. You know, it was amazing. Or Soho, excuse me. And I can't remember the name of one of them. Oh, Long Kwai Fong, very popular place for the expats. And the good-looking, drop-dead gorgeous Chinese women would hang out there because they were business class and they wanted to get in good with some of these guys so they could exchange visas to countries. The more time I spent in Hong Kong, I found that Hong Kong was a world of affairs and sin and sex and gambling with mahjong. Get on the boat and go to Macau. Macau is called the Las Vegas of Asia. The more time I spent in Hong Kong, the more I started to realize this place has a sadness and desperation over it. And all that facade of skyscrapers and night lights and all the activity, the millions of people that live and work there that cannot enjoy that kind of life that the expats and the upper end Chinese have. And here I am, kind of a dumb, naive American chasing some Filipino around, impressed with the city and more learning that they were looking at me like, man, this guy must be nice. He can come over here and play. And it began to dawn on me that some of the Asian people were looking at me. They saw me. They saw me go up into my place. And they thought, what is this guy doing? He's not working, and yet he's here and he's surviving. To them, they thought I was rich. They thought, this guy's got to be loaded with money. He can just come over here and have fun. Hong Kong is a beautiful city from a man point of view. Victoria Peak juts up behind it, so steep and precipitous, covered with dense growth. Beautiful green. You can take the bus or the taxi, actually the taxi up the Tai Tam Reservoir. It's almost like walking in Jurassic Park scene with all the growth and the hills, and you get up there. It's the middle of Hong Kong Island. And here's all these skyscrapers and millions of people, and you get up here in the middle of Hong Kong Island, Tai Tam Reservoir, you feel like you're dropped into China, hundreds of miles away from civilization. Amazing. Then you go out to new territories further out, the pace slows down, the cost of rent goes down, and people are a little more freer out there. We always have to remember something, viewers. Whenever we see all the skyscrapers and we see all the money and the power and prestige of that kind of skyline. You have to realize there's an awful lot of underlings that are keeping that city going. They never get to enjoy those accoutrements. On my YouTube video, Chinese in Hong Kong are rude, I had a lot of Chinese write me thoughtful stuff, many of them saying, you're right, we are rude. But please consider why. We have to work and work and work just to survive. And you can come over here, spend your money and have fun, and you have no idea how hard it is for us. He's right. I didn't know about the cage dwellings until my Aussie friend told me about it. She took me to dinner and said to me, you know, Pacific, have you heard of the cage dwellers? Type it in on YouTube. It's horrible. She said, I've had my friends, my lady friends, my expat friends get together and they have no clue what Hong Kong really is like. She said they talk about how the Chinese are rude and pushing and this and that. And I said, do you know that most of the Chinese in the city don't have anything close to the good life you have? And then she started telling some of her expat friends the real side of Hong Kong. Most of Hong Kong lives in poverty. When I lived in Hong Kong, it made the news. It happened when I was there. I think it was over in Kowloon. One of the high-rises, just all by itself with people living in it, collapsed. Why? A lot of those buildings weren't built with rebar. They were built with poured concrete. The building I lived in Shangwan. When I lived there, 2009, the big earthquake hit Haiti, big earthquake hit Chile, big ones, 8-point pluses, major damage. People ask me, Pacific, what would happen if that hit here? I said, oh my gosh. I said, this building. I said, if I was in this building, we'd all be gone. Big cracks in the concrete, big ones, cracks this wide, where they had reputtied them so the air and light wouldn't come through. Substandard construction, all the way up until the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Hong Kong was a lot of shanty town. Go back and look at the old videos on YouTube of Hong Kong in the 1950s. Check it out for yourself. Fires went there. They're there and burned up all those oriental gabled buildings. Hong Kong has a lot of sadness and a lot of desperation. And a lot of the Chinese, they have a hostility towards us because they were under British occupation. The Brits didn't do everything right. And when the British released control in 1997 and went back to China, it empowered the Chinese. Say, hey, this is ours now. But another dynamic's shaping up. Hong Kong Chinese don't want the mainland Chinese in there at all. Kind of like how Mexicans born in the U.S. don't care for the Mexicans coming over from Mexico. Hong Kong is a beautiful city. But Hong Kong is a wonderful place if you've got tons of money and you got the good life. If you don't, Hong Kong is your worst nightmare. The Filipinos that live out, living out, by the way, is illegal. It says right in there that the employer will provide a place for the domestic helper within their place. A lot of them don't want the domestic helper living there, so they force them to live out. There are so many Filipinos and Indonesian domestic helpers living out and Filipino drivers that Hong Kong does not have enough jail space if they were to enforce it, so they look the other way. My Filipino friend had a room. It was from this bed, here's my hand, and the wall is 6 inches from my hand out extended here. His room was that wide, and it was, you know, what is this, 10 foot? Not even that. I think it was just a little over 8 feet. He built shelves in his room to accommodate his personal effects. his laptop stand in his bed. He would have his girlfriend over and her girlfriend and friends, and they're all crowded in there, some on the bed, some sitting on a little chair, some kneeling on the floor. And they're laughing and talking and having fun. He paid 1,500 Hong Kong dollars for that a month, and that was a lot of money for him. I paid 2,000 for my bedroom, which was a little bit bigger. 2,000 came out to about, what did I figure that was? I gotta remember this now. It was about, I think it was like 200, 250 a month, something like that, US. What most people don't realize is that what we in America do every day, we cook, we clean, some of us iron, we run the washing machine, we wash our own vehicles, we drive our own vehicles, we get our own kids ready, we go to the grocery store, we do all that for ourselves. The rich expats and the rich Chinese, they hire the domestic helper to do all of that. Expat women don't clean their houses. Expat women don't do the grocery shopping. Expat women don't do the laundry and the folding and the ironing, not even for their husbands. Those domestic helpers get paid 400 US dollars a month. And they have health insurance. Many Americans say, well, hey, that's better. They're still modern day slaves. But let's talk about the Chinese that live and work there or work at a seafood restaurant. Let's talk about Harmony Restaurant in Shangwon, one of my favorite places to go. Come back a year later, those guys are still employed, still there. Here in the US, you'd be lucky if you see the same waitress staff and waiter staff at a restaurant after 2 years. They would chat with me. Some of them had very good English. In fact, one guy made a joke. You know, last week fried rice, today fried rice, every day fried rice, tomorrow fried rice. He was funny. He saw me bringing in different gals after this gal and I failed. And he said, you know, you have so many girlfriends. I said, they're just dates. But he'd kid me. He said, wow, they're all so pretty too. And one day I brought the Chinese woman in there and they all turned around like, whoa, he's with one of ours. It was funny. They stand on their feet for 12 hours. When they're not serving, they're standing up, hands at the sides, they're looking, and they're scanning the room non-stop. Contrast that to a waitress in an American restaurant. When she gets a break, she can lean against the counter. They're not allowed to lean against anything. They're not allowed to sit. 12 hours a day. The minimum wage in Hong Kong was just voted to be upped, and it was pathetically low. I thought, man, they cannot live on minimum wage there at all. These people work every day, and those Chinese restaurants, they're not like America where they do have their rushes, but those restaurants are going from the time they open to the time they closed with not a lot of slack. I'd come into Harmony Restaurant, there were booths and there were tables out in the center. Tables that were big enough for, in America, 5, 6 people. They got 15 of us around that during lunch hour. I'd come in there, you just stand and wait, and the guy would say, okay, you there, and point to one stool jammed in amongst a bunch of Chinese men I don't know. You just sit down. And they're eating like this. Fast, not much talking, and if they do talk, they were talking loud to their friends, and talking about the day's business. They eat their food, they pay their bill, they leave. They're not like us where we sit back and sip the coffee. You eat, you get out. I liked the whole thing, but I realized Hong Kong life is hectic, fast-paced, and you're on a treadmill. Millions of people that live in Hong Kong and millions of Chinese, it is hard for them to smile. They get annoyed, and rightfully so, at the expat community that comes in there, gets drunk, throws their beer bottles all over the street, loudmouth, rude, disrespecting of the Asian culture that owns the place and lives there and is their country. And these obnoxious expats come in. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Mostly are Aussies. I had a guy at Harmony Restaurant said, "Are you going to go drink with the Australians over there in Soho?" I said, "I don't drink." "What? You don't drink?" He says, "Wow, you good man." He says, "You know, they're so stupid. They throw their bottles, they're obnoxious, they get into trouble. You know, that's why a lot of us don't like them." I want to say something because some people didn't get this in my Hong Kong Chinese are rude in Hong Kong video. There were a lot of nice Chinese. When they got to know Pacific and saw me consistently, saw my respectfulness and politeness to them, then they let me in. When I tried to learn a few of their words, I don't hate Chinese, viewers, at all. I don't like people calling the Chinese chinks. That is inappropriate and is wrong. They are not chinks. They are people that have hopes and dreams. Most people in Hong Kong never have a chance to dream. The Filipinos and the Indonesian that are there are stressed, pushed, all for a pittance of pay. When they see a man like me walk in the streets, and I take the time to go into a Philippine karaoke bar, and they don't see me drinking, but me singing their song and sitting down right next to them and not being arrogant, they suddenly, their eyes, they think, "Oh my gosh, what if he wants me?" I would be loved and I'd be out of my circumstance. American males that are thinking about dating overseas, my viewers, if you go over there and play the field and I catch up to you, I will take a baseball bat to you. Don't do it. If you want an Asian woman, you find one and you focus on one and you make sure she loves you and you make sure you love her and give her a better life. Don't spoil her, but give her a better life, starting with your heart to her. Pacific was ignorant when I went over there. I was caught up in the exotic beauty of the Filipina. I tended to look past the faults, even though I saw them. I saw the red flags. But Pacific had lived a rejected, bullied, depressed life, barely making it from paycheck to paycheck, trying to live what he believes, struggling, failing often. I get to Hong Kong and I feel like I finally lived. I've stood, my feet were on another continent, and I woke up in a bed in another country and heard the sounds wafting up to my open window and the sounds of Chinese voices and the distinct car horns that are different than here in the U.S. and the sounds of even the motorcycles were different, and I loved every minute of it. The lady that lived above me in Shangwan was an old, stove-up woman. She had a dog up there that would scratch on the tile. I'd take a mop handle and go tink, tink, tink. This dog go. And I said to Leo, the Filipino, I said, "What is that?" "Oh, the dog, he's scratching it, wake everybody up." And I said, "I'll put an end to that." Tink, tink, tink. And I'd do that and the dog would stop. That woman would come down the stairs and I'd say, "Hello, hello." And the place had a smell when the door was open. A lot of Chinese don't live the good life. Where I lived in Shangwan, an Aussie woman came to buy my dresser, the one I walked the dog for. It's funny, I put an ad in the Craigslist for that chest of drawers, or the Asia expat. It was a highboy, but narrow with the ring poles on it, very distinct Chinese. It was given to me, and I could not afford the shipping back to the U.S. It was outrageous. Beautiful piece of furniture. I sold it for a measly $250. In the U.S., that thing would have sold for $1,000, no doubt. She called and says, "Yes, I'm calling about the dresser." And I said, "Is this Sandy?" "Oh my God, is this Michael?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "What are the chances of you putting an ad for something and you and I connect? Where are you located?" And I told her, and I said, I'll meet you down at this place. I bring her upstairs on the 3rd floor into my place. I open the door and she goes, "Oh, this is illegal as hell." Exact words. She goes, "How do you live like this?" I said, "I love Hong Kong. I can deal with this." She goes, "Is this how the Filipinos live that live out?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "This is deplorable." You know what's funny? I love that old place. It was all tile, but she could see it divvied up into little cubicle rooms, and she just couldn't believe it. Now, they weren't cage dwellings. We had it good. But in a flat designed for 1 or 2 people, we had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us in there. 7 of us. I don't want to give anybody the impression that Hong Kong is all glitz and glamour. For the greenhorn from the country, or even the greenhorn from American City, first time you go into Hong Kong and you fly in on a jet and you see those skyscrapers, you're just like, oh wow. Then you take the bus from Lantau, the airport, and you come into Hong Kong at night and you're just like, whoa, it's impressive. But remember, in every city, there's always an underbelly. I lived in the underbelly. I lived in Sheungwan. They called that the old Chinese neighborhood. I laughed. I said, Hong Kong is Chinese neighborhood. What do you mean the old Chinese neighborhood? Sheungwan is where the hardworking, mostly poor people lived. Just a couple blocks away was Sai Em Poom, where they lay out all the dried goods out on the sidewalk to dry in the sun. The smells of sea, briny things, and shrimp and things that looked like animal turds that were different forms of weeds and kelp and all kinds of interesting things. I connected with Hong Kong because I went there without my mommy and daddy, without a church telling me what God's will was. My mistakes included, I lived and breathed and swam Hong Kong, but the more time I spent there, people asked me, Pacific, if you had big money, I said I would go there and spend a few months there and enjoy. I have a good lady friend I'd like to see again. But I don't want to live there. It's too crazy. Very dangerous crossing the streets in Hong Kong. The Chinese taxi cabs will run you over, and they do, and they have. They have killed many a domestic helper because of their reckless and dangerous driving. I cannot tell you how many taxi cabs I've taken my fist and hit the hood of that car so hard because they almost ran me over when they had a stop sign. The Chinese don't think behind the wheel there of safety. They think that when they're in the car, they have the right of way everywhere. And it's hairy. Very good idea to cross only at crosswalk lights. Fortunately, in Hong Kong, when the crosswalk lights come on, nobody can turn, nobody can go. It's red in all directions. It has to be. Otherwise, people would get killed. You have to watch what you're doing when you cross a street, because there's a tram that goes this way and a tram that goes that way, and traffic's on the wrong side of the road compared to the U.S., and there's a lot to watch for. And people get off of that tram, they don't think, they get off, and bam! I saw 3 different times when I lived there where somebody had just walked into a tram, and I saw a guy laying face down, blood coming from his face, another one sitting on the side of the tracks that had just been hit, blood all over his face, and another one who was killed. I didn't see him killed. I'm sorry. I saw the body. And it was the Filipina friends. The tram had stopped, and we were so busy talking. And then one of my friends says, "Oh, I think we need to get off. I think I just heard the driver say somebody hit by the other tram." We get off. I see a body on the street. I said, "Oh my gosh, let's go." There was already people around it, so there was nothing I could do. A little story I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to close with this. I was on the tram going from Causeway Bay to Central to go to lunch. I had gone to the library and done my internet and uploaded some videos, and I would go to lunch. And I'm standing at the back of the tram. There's a wheel back there because it used to be a tram that it could be driven from either the front to the back. They didn't do that anymore. They had updated it and put controls in the one front, and they had the old wheel in the back. And I'd stand back there and I'd look out the window. Everybody fight for the seats upstairs or downstairs, and I like standing on the back because most of the time, unless it was really crowded, I could thread my way down the aisle and out the front. You pay as you get off. You can't get out the back doors because they open one way. The tram's bumping along, and all of a sudden I feel something hit my back calf so hard, and my first reaction is, damn, who just slammed into me? And I turn around, and this old Chinese man had fallen, and what saved his head from a complete concussion was my calf was the pillow for his head. I turn around and said, "Oh." I said, "Are you okay?" Of course, he doesn't speak English. And I cradled his head gently. Another Chinese guy, we both got under his armpits, lifted him back up. What had happened is he went to step up a step. The tram jerked forward. He lost his balance and fell backwards, and his head landed on my leg. Just that little episode taught me, you think God wasn't in the details? All of a sudden, my leg didn't hurt anymore. I thought, thank God his head hit my leg. If my leg hadn't been there, he would have hit that floor so hard he would have rang his bell and might have killed him. We lifted him in the seat, and the guy was totally dazed, and then he very politely, in Chinese said, "Doi sai." There was a Chinese woman standing next to me when that whole thing happened, and she went, "Ah!" And after I came back to my spot, she looked at me with wide-eyed terror, and she go, "That scared me." I said, "It scared me too." I said, "But I'm glad my leg was there. If my leg wasn't there, he would have been seriously hurt." She goes, "Yeah, I know. And the Chinese are very affected by tragedy, and they are afraid of death. And when that woman got off the tram unloaded, then it slowly pulled away. I looked out the window. That woman crossed the street. She turned back and looked at me, and I put my hand up and I waved. And she put her hand up and waved. Most of you will think, okay, that's gay Pacific. No, it isn't. That touched me. I connected with her because of my compassion for one of her own Chinese. I didn't think, oh, some Chinaman just fell on me. I thought, oh, that hurt. That had to hurt. Oh my gosh, I'm glad my leg was there, and I just thought of helping him. I don't want anybody to think I don't like the Chinese. I didn't like the rudeness I saw there. The Chinese are people too, and their culture is different than ours, and that is okay. The more I watch American culture, I'm disgusted with our culture. The Chinese have a lot to be commended for, and you need to get out of your small world, Americans, and you need to realize that just because the culture is different doesn't mean that they're wrong and we're right. I love Hong Kong, but Hong Kong has a lot of heartache. There's a lot of homeless people in Hong Kong. There's a lot of people who have it very hard. When I was there, a 104-year-old man died when I was there in the street because of the cold spell that came in. It got down to the 40s. And people wrote in to the Hong Kong Daily Standard and said, here's a 104-year-old man and there's no resources to take care of him in the city. Hong Kong's not all that it's cracked up to be. I love Hong Kong, but Hong Kong has a sadness over it. The dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots is is inexcusable. To watch the expats party it up, be rude, loud, and obnoxious, and brag about how much better Australia is, and shove back to the Chinese, I had a hard time with that. I thought, for crying out loud, you're in their country, watch your manners, man. And then to meet girls that work with their mothers that are my age, selling hair accessories at a little kiosk, the green metal sheds that the roll-up doors go up, and they work all day to make $1 to live. I think of the Sandy, who was the Chinese woman my age, who always talked to me when I walked the Aussie lady's dog. Cocker Spaniel, Irish Setter mix, cute dog. Chinese girls love that red dog. Don't forget this, viewers. There's some good people in Hong Kong. But Hong Kong's a city of sorrows and struggle too. I love the place, but I wouldn't want to live there indefinitely. This is Pacific signing off. Bye-bye.